Looks like LTC's up.
Mark, is that a 9889 number?
Yes, that's me.
Oh, I just want to make sure I was naming you correctly on here.
Do we have Chairman Perrin tonight?
He is not on the line, so we could always start with Vice Chairman Peck.
Yep.
If the Chairman doesn't join.
All right, gentlemen. We're gonna give it another minute or so, and then we'll start if everyone's okay with that.
All right.
Just in
Since
case.
it's such a light agenda, I think we can manage.
All right, everyone. I think we're just gonna get started. If anyone shows up, we can update people and all that.
Fair enough.
So welcome. All right. So welcome. Again, this is Van Pack, Vice Chairman, Zoning Board of Appeals. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to City Hall Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for August 24th, 2020. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the meeting will not occur in person. It is being done through Zoom or through telephone conference. We're going to move into continued business, just none. So we'll move into new business. Under new business, we have ZB-2020-31. Petition is a variance. The applicant is Kenneth Lena, care of Maca JCK7 LLC. The property is located at 56 Hilder Street and 161 Jewett Street. MacJack 7 LLC is seeking variance approval to modify the existing lot, raise the existing garage building, and construct two single-family homes at 56 Hilder Street and 161 Jewett Street. Both lots are in the traditional neighborhood single zoning district. The proposal requires variance approval under section 5.1 for minimum lot width, minimum frontage, minimum front yard setback, and any other relief required of the low zoning ordinance. Is the applicant here this evening?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman. In fact, this is Kenneth Laney of Cornerstone Land Associates representing the applicant this evening. How's everyone?
Very good.
Good evening, sir. You want to
All
talk
right.
a little bit about your project, Mr. Lania?
Absolutely, yes. So my client purchased the property that was owned in single ownership at 56 Hilder Street and 161 Jewett Street. Currently, the parcel itself has an existing set of garages. I believe it's around, I want to say it's 8 or 10 garages in one long, narrow building located with mostly access from the Hilder Street side of the parcel. And what we're looking to do is to raise that existing structure, split the lot into two conforming lot area sized lots, and construct two single family homes on the parcels. One parcel will have sufficient frontage and area, will be completely conforming, require no variances, and that would be the parcel fronting on Hilder Street. The second parcel being created would be 30-foot in width, which is all that we currently have existing for the parcel itself. Then that space would gain extra land area to meet the lot area requirements for the TSF zone. And ultimately, we are requesting the variances for that particular lot. Now, parcel itself would have a frontage variance request, as we can only achieve 30 feet, as that's all that is existing. And we would also be requesting a lot width variance and also a maximum setback for the yard. In this particular case, we've chosen to place the dwelling for that lot in the rear to allow for a normal size structure to be constructed. As you can see, with a lot width of only 30 feet for that, pretty much the length of that entire existing lot, and a setback requirement of 17 feet when cumulative put together would only allow a 13-foot wide structure on that parcel. So what we were hoping to do is use the lot width that we have as the driveway area, set the house back in the rear of the parcel lot area, and have the new structure being constructed meet all the lot setback requirements. We feel as though that this proposal, as presented with the 2 single-family dwellings, is not detrimental to the neighborhood. There is sufficient lot area, as I believe the lot that we are requesting the frontage variance for and the lot width variance for is about 2,000 square feet over the required lot area size in that zoning district. We believe that the lot itself, due to its unique narrow shape and our inability to obtain any additional land area to either side of this parcel, as to the north there's an existing duplex, and to the south is the existing parking area for the apartment building located at 50 Hampshire Street. We believe that the 2 structures, albeit one lot requiring a variance, would be in kind with the neighborhood, as the neighborhood's a mix of single-family, duplex, and, as I stated, the adjacent apartment structure. We're hoping that the zoning board will look fairly and kindly on this application and allow us to move forward with the construction of these 2 single-family homes. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Laney, for that summary of your project. So if you don't have any more comments, I'm just going to open it to the public to see if they want to weigh in any comments or questions. So right now we'll open the meeting to the public. Anyone wishing to speak in favor? Any members of the public wishing to speak in favor? In favor, hearing none, the portion of the public hearing is closed. Any members of the public wishing to speak in opposition? In opposition? In opposition, hearing none, that portion of the public hearing is closed. I'm just going to open up to the board for questions and comments. And just a reminder, just the public record, just identify yourself when you talk. The chair recognizes Mr. Breer. Mr. Breer, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Mark Breer speaking. I'd like to ask Mr. Lanier if he's in possession of the DPD memorandum.
Yes, Mr. Breer, I am. I have it on my screen. I am reviewing it with the conditions that were listed by Ms. Sigliano.
Okay. Well, what I'd like you to do, I appreciate your presentation, but I do not believe that the items listed in the memorandum were adequately addressed. So I think to help all members of the board, I would like you to go through them and provide us with a more informative presentation, please.
Absolutely. So the first comment by Ms. Sigliano was just identifying that the homes are in the urban neighborhood single family. This is something that I would agree with. On section number 2, she states that 161 Jewett Street is currently a vacant parcel. So that parcel itself, that fronts on 161 Jewett Street, is an existing parcel that is approximately 2,550 square feet. It is vacant. It is currently overgrown with vegetation. And the second parcel is 56 Hildreth Street. That parcel itself is approximately 6,298 square feet. And as you can see, the existing structure in Fran's photograph showing, I want to say it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 9, 10 garages in a single story garage building. And ultimately, our goal here was to raise that building. So let's move on to number 3. The board should note that the applicant proposes a front yard setback of 67 feet on the 161 Jewett Street side. The long driveway, board should consider whether this proposed layout would align with the development patterns in the existing neighborhood. 8 of the surrounding properties on Jewett Street have front yards that range between 0 and 27 feet. So we looked into this, Mr. Vice Chair, Mr. Chair, and the reason that we proposed the dwelling to be such setback in the area was just so that we could construct a typical size single family house to allow for the access of the property with vehicles and the garage, due to the fact that that narrow width of the existing parcel, which is only 30 feet, it already does not conform to the frontage requirements, hence the request for the variance. And ultimately, we believe that a single-family home on that lot would be a benefit for the need for the workforce housing that's in the city of Lowell, and also allow for off-street parking, so that was long enough to handle approximately 4 vehicles plus the garage, another additional 5th vehicle. We did look into trying to squeeze a small building on that lot and utilize the existing lot itself, but I didn't believe that that was the best fit for the parcel, as it would be cramming in a very narrow home into what I believe is a very nice neighborhood. There's newly constructed homes across the street, and I think that we can do very well in making this house, albeit it's setback, be very architecturally in kind with the remainder of the neighborhood. Number 4, the board should note that the applicant does not propose. So I apologize, I didn't put together a landscaping plan for this particular parcel, but we would be glad to submit a landscaping plan. Our goal would be to put screening on either side of the property line, on the south side where the parking area is for the new owners of the proposed house, and then also for the northern side where the duplex already exists. The board should note that there are several large trees next to the existing garage, and I believe that what Fran's talking about is in the front. There are a couple of large trees in the front there. We actually would be planning on taking those trees down. But again, we would work with DPD to come up with a landscaping plan for both the single-family lot on Hildreth and the single-family lot on Jewett, so that we can ensure that we're not disturbing the landscaping for the neighborhood. The board should also note that at 56 Hildreth Street, entirely paved. And again, it's not our intention to keep all that pavement. Our hope will be to remove the pavement, remove the structure, construct the single family on Hildreth Street with the driveway shown, and the gray area on the plan that was provided by our office shows what we're intending to have for paved area, which again would just be the driveway servicing the single family homes, one exiting it out onto Hildreth Street and the other exiting out on Jewett Street. So I know that Fran had asked for a condition to limit the extent of impervious surface, and we are 100% agreeable with that. My understanding is I do have a rendering for the structures. They are just planning to be single-family structures. And what we can do is, I don't mind an additional condition that we would work with DPD to verify that, you know, the structures provided by the applicant would be sufficient and in kind with that neighborhood. So I believe that the comments that Fran posed are acceptable. the conditions, again, are acceptable to us. And ultimately, the major concern of the front yard setback distance, again, in our view of the project, to help it actually fit more in kind with the neighborhood, was to allow that house to be set back so it could be constructed of normal width and to allow for the off-street parking, with such a narrow lot size that we thought that that would be the most advantageous development for this neighborhood. And that is my review of the comments, Mr. Breer. I hope that answered everything that you had questions for.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Lanier. You have certainly answered many of the questions I had, and I thank you for addressing the DPD concerns. I believe that you have done so satisfactorily. So pending any proposed conditions, I look favorably upon this petition. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Breer, for the comments. The chair recognizes Mr. McCarthy. Mr. McCarthy, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I'd like to ask a few questions, but I really like the thoroughness of the application as far as the format, but I think that there's a number of items that are missing for review for the zoning board to render an opinion, and I'll go through those, but I'd like to start with the letter, Mr. Lanier, that you wrote. It states that you're looking, I guess it's paragraph 3, granting relief from section 5.1 for the development of the proposed subdivision would not nullify, substantially derogate from the intent of zoning, as it requires no relief from the current lot area requirements, and would allow for 3 new family dwellings. So we're looking at a letter here that you have as part of your application that states 3 new single-family dwellings.
Mr. McCarthy, I apologize. That is an error on our part here in the office. It is only a 2 proposed lot development. In this particular case, it's just the 1 lot on Jewett Street and the 2nd lot on Hildreth Street. So that is an error.
Thank you. I was struggling to find where we had 3 because
Guys, I completely, you know what, when we looked at this originally, and not that this is an excuse, there is a provision of the bylaw that allows you to add accessory apartment units to these particular types of lots. And we were originally going to have an accessory unit added to the lot on Hildreth Street. But after some considerable discussion with the applicant, I felt as though it wasn't appropriate to add an additional unit in this particular location due to the fact that I do find it to be a congested area. I do live in that neighborhood, kind of an offshoot. I live closer to Hannaford, but I definitely live in this area. So that was my mistake, because we had originally had a single family on the Jewett, and I was proposing 2 units on the Hildreth Street side. But we've since discussed that, felt as though it wasn't what was best for the neighborhood, and reduced each lot to a single family house.
Bringing that up, Mr. Vice Chairman, there was a letter submitted from an abutter, or from maybe a butter, stating her disappointment or disagreement with this petition. That I don't know if we addressed in the early part of the meeting, but we should probably bring that out for discussion. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Lanier.
I was saying I was in receipt of that as well. I do agree that that was a comment issued, and I believe that in this particular case, I know she's saying this is a congested area, and I would agree with the response. But ultimately, like I said, we actually looked at this in several different ways to try and analyze what would be best for the neighborhood. And ultimately, it was our feeling, with the amount of vehicles, the strict parking going on the roadway, the new sidewalks that were just installed on Hildreth Street, that to just go with 2 single-family dwelling units, although we could add additional accessory apartment units, would be the right thing to do for the neighborhood so that we would keep it as least congested as possible with this new development. There'll be no vehicles that require on-street parking for both of these lots to meet the zoning requirement for parking. And in fact, I believe that we have excessive parking for the Jewett Street lot and also additional parking for the single family on Hildreth. So I don't know if it's necessary to read that comment into the record. If that's so, I'll keep quiet so that can be done. I apologize if I interjected too early.
I guess I just wanted to make it aware that we do have one neighbor that is stating that she's against this petition and is citing that there's too much congestion in the neighborhood to support the variance for the second lot to support another home. Although I think we could certainly make the case that that existing lot, if it were, the lot lines were divided, could support a house without a variance, even though it'll only be 13 feet wide. So
I would agree with that.
I think that if you subdivide the lots as you're showing it, you could have 2 conforming structures there, single-family houses, if you weren't granted the variance that you're asking for. Anyway, I think that we could be looking at 2 houses regardless of whether we granted a variance or not. In any event, also the congestion piece. So I think it's 12 garages that exist there today. And we're looking at, on Hildreth Street, reducing the traffic from whatever 12 garages generates to a single family that would have 2 or 3 cars. So there's, I think, a reduction in traffic flow on Hildreth Street in what I see, or a reduction in congestion on Hildreth Street. I don't know if that's something that you could speak to, Mr. Lania.
I would agree. Actually, most of these garages are being utilized for storage, so they get utilized a lot with cars being stored in them by some of the people actually in the 50 Hampshire apartment building, plus additional, storage for offices and that type of stuff. I believe that the reduction here on Hildreth Street is really going to be made up of the folks from 50 Hampshire Street utilizing this portion of the lot for their parking. A lot of cars go in and out of this Hildreth Street entrance and park on this lot for the 50 Hampshire Street building. And that ultimately is going to be eliminated with the construction of these 2 single-family homes. So the 50 Hampshire Street would actually have access out onto Jewett Street as it does now, and then out onto Hampshire Street as it does now, but would it be eliminating the entrance and exit out onto Hildreth Street, which I believe is a reduction of congestion on that roadway, especially in traffic coming in and out of Hildreth Street.
Good. That's how I see it as well. And so I think that that's important to point out for the neighbors that see this as potentially adding to congestion. I think that this would be the opposite, especially with Hildreth Street. But that being said, you did a lovely job of including in your application, the applicant must submit a plan containing the following data. And in that list of things that you've included, you have not submitted that information. And so we don't have a complete package from you. Pieces that are problematic, in my opinion, for the submission is the adequacy of the site plan and the missing information regarding the structures. So those are pieces that I need to see before I can feel comfortable that we're doing something here that makes sense regarding the variance from my standpoint. Also, I'd like to hear more about who it is that's doing the work here. My sense is that we're granting a variance for a site plan, and my hope is that it's going to a responsible builder that's going to do exactly what we are expecting them to do with the submission. That being said, we don't have an indication of the type of structures. We don't have an indication of what's going on in the site regarding landscaping. We don't have information what's going on in the site regarding drainage or green space. So I think that, and I also think that we have pavement up against the building on the Hilda Street side that I think the bylaws require us to have 3 feet between the house and the pavement. And we have an 18-foot wide driveway on the Dewar Street side, but I don't know, is that going to a 2-car garage? Why is it 18 feet wide? Does it need to be 18 feet? Could it be less? So I would like to see a more thorough or a complete, not even a more thorough, a complete application made that includes the information that's required in this section that you cited, 11.2.3 variance prerequisites. And those are just the minimum things that need to be provided that aren't provided today or tonight. So is there a reason why they're missing, Mr. Lania?
Mr. McCarthy, I can't speak to the renderings. I just received those today. I don't really have control over the renderings. I had asked the applicant to get those over to DPD as soon as we did the filing, so I apologize for that delay. And as far as the landscaping open space, I guess I presumed that all the areas, and that's why I showed the gray as pavement. The remaining areas in the structure around that would end up being grassed and landscaped, but I can definitely provide a landscaping plan to the
Well,
DPP
we
as
know
part
that
of this application.
we know that that's not always the case because
No, I
oftentimes
understand. I understand.
entrances are provided with a entrance front walkway, and sometimes there's a rear deck and a rear cellar entrance, and there's a lot of things that aren't there, and that's something that gets
Absolutely.
developed when you do the building plan. So you see where the entry door is, and is there a front porch, and is
Yep.
there a back porch, and all these things are not there. And so we're looking at a very schematic plan that is not complete and does not meet the requirements that you listed in that section.
And I apologize, Mr. McCarthy. I'd be glad to update the site plan. And now that I am in possession of the the proposed structure renderings, I'd be glad to provide those for your review as well.
In the proposed building renderings, I just don't want to stop with renderings. I think we need to see that the buildings aren't representing 3-story structures that have 5 bedrooms.
Yep, I
think
completely
we-
understand.
And that there are floor plans that show responsible single-family houses that aren't turned into, places
Potential-
where people kind of rent rooms and whatever. We just want to know exactly what the intent is.
Completely understand. I'd be glad to provide those for you guys so that you can make a better decision. Absolutely.
And I'd also like to learn more about the intent of the applicant because I really feel bothered by the applicants asking for variances, and then the applicants sit on the property and then sell it to somebody else. Or it just bothers me that we're granting variances potentially to people that aren't doing the construction or not being responsible for the construction. So is the applicant ready, if the variances are granted, to break ground and to build on these houses, in the next year or so, on these lots, the next year or so? Or is this something that's going to wait for someone else to come by and develop, if you will?
Yeah, my understanding is the applicant is going to do the construction in this particular case. That I doubt that we'd start this prior to the winter coming. Ultimately, as there's a lot of preparation that would need to be done. I believe there are still, as I stated, some people that have utilizing and are still utilizing those garages. We'd have to work with them to clear that up. But ultimately, the applicant is the contractor, and the contractor would be constructing these come, I would hope, minus any crazy COVID-19 stuff occurring next year as well, beginning in late spring.
I would love that. That would be my hope and wish that we'd be breaking ground in spring. If the application could include some information about this
Building?
developer
Yep.
contractor so that we can just feel like there's a responsible entity here that would be, if the variance is granted, be receiving the variance that would then follow through with what we're granting and build something responsible for the neighborhood to be proud of.
Absolutely. I could get you some builder info, and I'll actually put a timeline in there for you.
If possible for me, I would love to see some examples nearby where he's done work. If he's done work in the city, if he's done work nearby and near in cities nearby or whatever, but something that we can, see as a similar kind of situation. But I like the application. I just feel like I don't have enough information to go forward tonight with the lack of detail on the site plan that doesn't meet the prerequisites and the lack of information on the buildings that doesn't meet the prerequisites. So in my opinion, I need to see you meet the prerequisites required for us to grant a variance. So I would like to see a continuance and you gather the correct information to meet the minimum standards of the submission, which is the prerequisites. But I do like the application. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy, for that. I just for the public record, I do want to read a letter we got from the butter. I know we just talked about it for a minute or so. Just for the public record, we did get communication earlier today before the close of business day. So I'm going to read the letter. The letter states, "Dear Sir, Madam, I am not in favor of the variance for 56 Hildreth Street and 161 Jewett Street. The area in general is highly congested. Construction would impact the safety of the many children in the adjacent properties of 50 Hildreth Street and Jewett Street. I consider the building of 2 houses not feasible in this small area. Thank you for your attention in this matter. Best regards, Marianne Gronowski, 43 Hildreth Street." Just so for the public record, I wanted to read that for the record. So moving on to members' questions and comments. The chair recognizes Mr. Callahan. Mr. Callahan, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chairman. This is Sean Callahan from the ZBA. I share the same questions as far as Dennis is concerned, especially on the renderings, Mr. Lania. I'm just, I mean, it's a great package. You put it together. It's fine. And it looks like it may be able to fit in there. But without seeing the renderings of the proposed properties, I don't know if that's going to cause me to have even more concerns. Especially, I think you had mentioned on the Jewett Street side with the driveway, that there's going to be a garage there. But I'm looking at the site plan and I'm trying to think, where's the front porch going to be then? Because it looks like it's just the driveway just drives into the building, to the dwelling. But where is there going to be a front porch? Where is the entryway? Is that going to encroach on any side yard setbacks that I'm unaware of? And without seeing the renderings, I've got more questions than anything. Also, I'm kind of looking at Fran's, and I know you guys did your homework. You always do, to try to get this. And I'm sure the dwelling is in the place where probably the best spot for you. But I'd like to see what efforts are made to try to move the structure up a little bit more, if it's possible, to try to. I know you want to try to squeeze it in there, because I think one of the concerns from DPD was trying to have the dwelling on Jewett Street at least somewhat fit in with the front yard setbacks of the rest of the neighborhood. I think seeing the dwelling, seeing the renderings of the dwelling itself would probably answer a lot of my concerns on that. But again, without that information, I'm in agreement with Dennis. I don't think we have full enough information to really render a decision on this, and I would probably suggest that we continue that, and you can, provide that information to us, as well as the landscaping plan which I certainly would like to see now that you mentioned that you plan on taking down those 2 trees um, that was mentioned in DPD's memo, and as well as a drainage plan to see how everything's going to be, how things would go with that. So that's my those are my suggestions, that we probably continue this so we can provide us with additional information. Because I for one don't believe, in agreement with Dennis, I don't think we have enough information to render a decision on this. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Callahan. Again, it's Van Pack. All right, the chair recognizes Mr. Prokop. Prokop, the floor is yours, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Mr. Lanier, I actually do have to share the same sentiments of Mr. McCarthy and Mr. Callahan. I took a drive down there, before this meeting, just so I can have an idea. And, after I saw the response of the abutter, I thought it would be important to look. And, I saw, children, playing there, riding their bikes. And so one of the concerns that I would think about is, since there's children in the area and you're talking about cutting down trees, I would be interested in seeing what you would have for green space in that neighborhood, which Kevin alluded to as well. I'm sorry, Dennis. So that, yeah, I don't think we have enough information. So I definitely would like to see a little bit more on that.
Excellent.
Thank you. Mr. Prokop. Mr. Lanier, did you want to discuss any of the comments in terms of coming back just for some more updated plans? Do you want to comment on any of those, Mr. Lanier?
Yeah, Mr. Peck, if it's all right with you, I'd request a continuance of the matter to allow me to work with the applicant to, clear up the concerns that the board may have, so that, we can have a clear and concise decision at the next hearing, once everybody can visualize how this, 2 new single-family homes would fit in that area, with the plans for the dwellings, so that we can get better informed in the landscaping and the green space as well. If that's possible, I'd ask for that recommendation.
Yeah, I think you heard the wish of the board. I think people do want a little more information regarding this project. So I'm looking at the calendar, and Ms. Alvarez, correct me if I'm off. Our next meeting is either September 14th or the 28th. So those are your options for choices, Mr. Lanier.
Yeah, I mean, I know that I received building plans today, Mr. Vice Chair, so I'd have no problem meeting the timeline for the 14th, if that was possible. And that should give you guys a good week and a half, 2 weeks to look at the plans, maybe go back out to the site if need be, and, provide me enough time to do a nice greenscape rendering and landscape plan that I can provide to DEP.
Yeah, I think September 14th works, unless anyone has any objections or comments to that date.
Through Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to comment that in addition to the green space and landscaping, I think we want to understand how site drainage is being handled. One of the prerequisites is showing contours. I think it's 1 foot, if not 2 foot contours. And I believe they're flat sites, more or less, but I think it does slope a little bit from Hildreth down, going south. So drainage is important here, and I think we want to understand how that's being handled, so we don't influence other neighboring lots with runoff.
That's not a problem.
And also, if I could just mention, the existing conditions plan is not thorough enough, in my opinion, because there's a fenced area right now on the existing lot on George Street that doesn't show. And I think that fenced area that encloses that green treat area is not 30 feet wide. I think it's closer to 20 feet wide. So I don't know where the other 10 feet is, if it's on the parking lot for the adjacent building or where it is. So I think the existing conditions plan has to show the existing fence. Existing conditions plan, in my opinion, should show buildings and structures like fences, and then also limits of pavement. If we could get that, just so we understand
That's
Because-
not a problem.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you,
One
Mr.
more thing,
McCarthy, and thank you, Mr.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, one more thing too. I'd just like to mention, Dennis had mentioned this before too, Mr. Lanier, as far as the renderings, I don't know what you received from your client that you have in your possession, but Dennis did mention they'd like to see, breakdown of the number of units or the breakdown of the interior of the structures, so we know how many bedrooms and what other
Right.
types of floors and how many floors, how many bedrooms, how many other rooms we're dealing with. And I would like to see that as well. So,
Yeah, I'll be submitting floor plans and elevations, Mr. Callahan. That way, I call them renderings. I apologize, but yeah, full floor plans. Obviously not architecturally ready for construction, but ultimately the layout of the interior with first floor, second floor, number of bedrooms. I'll provide all that information.
thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Callahan and Ms. Lania. All right, so hearing no other questions or comments regarding this petition, we'll have a motion to continue the matter to our September 14th meeting. Could we just get a motion for that?
Mr. Chairman, this is Sean Callahan, the clerk. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion on ZB 2020-31 for 56 Hildreth Street and 161 Jewett Street to continue the public hearing in this matter to September 14th, 2020.
All right, motion by Mr. Callahan on the floor. Anyone second the motion?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to second the motion.
All right, second one, by Mr. McCarthy. Can we have a roll call, please?
Vice Chairman Peck,
Approve continuance for September 14th.
Member Callahan,
Approved continuance to September 14th, 2020.
Member McCarthy,
Approve continuance to September 14th.
Member Briere,
Approve continuance.
Member Prokop.
Approve continuance, September 14th.
All right, Ms. Lana, you've been approved for continuance to September 14th. We'll see you in a few weeks with the information. Have a good evening, sir.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, members and Vice Chair. I appreciate it. You guys have a great evening as well. We'll see you shortly.
Great.
Thank you. You too.
Good night.
Thank you. Moving on to our next agenda item under other business. We have minutes for approval for August 10th, 2020. Any comments or questions from the members for the minutes for August 10th? Going once, going twice, hearing none. Can we have a motion to approve the minutes for August 10th, 2020, please?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, this is Sean Callahan, the clerk. I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes for August 10th, 2020.
Sorry,
Mike Briere
motion by-
seconds the motion.
All right, motion by Mr. Cannon, second by Mr. Briere. Can we have a roll call, please, for the minutes?
Vice Chairman Peck,
Accept the minutes for August 10th, 2020.
Member Callahan,
Approved minutes for August 10th, 2020.
Member McCarthy,
Accept the minutes for August 10th.
Member Briere,
Acceptance.
Member Prokop.
Acceptance for minutes for August 10th.
All right, minutes have been accepted for August 10th. Here, if there's no other comments or questions by anybody, I'll move to adjourn the meeting. Any questions or comments from the board or anybody? Going once, going twice, hearing none. Can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting, please?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion by Ms. Callen to adjourn the meeting, second by,
By George.
I'll second.
Oh,
Go for it. Go, George. Do it.
second by,
George Broker
motion
seconds.
by Ms.
Your first
Thank-
second.
Thank you, sir.
Jumping in there.
Congratulations.
Thank Motion to adjourn by Mr. Callahan, second by Mr. Prokop. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hey,
Aye.
All right, any
Aye.
say nay? No nays, the ayes have it. We are adjourned. Have a good evening. Thank you, everyone.
Have a good
Thanks,
night,
guys.
everyone.
Have a good one. We'll see you.
nice job, man. Thank
Good job. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.